Hello, this is TC Lee. I'm here today to bring you the up-to-date information about everything to do with tanking in update 28 with regards to Alkosh, gear sets and group penetration. So the most common questions I've been asked over the last couple of weeks has been, is Alkosh needed? What are we going to replace Alkosh with? What has changed to make Alkosh not be needed anymore? So we're going to try and answer all those questions for you guys today. I didn't want to commit to too many things too early on in the PTS, as things do often change on the PTS, but we're now at the point where the PTS is finished. Update 28 will be live in a few weeks, so now would be a good time to start planning ready for next patch. So first of all, what has changed? So the main thing that affects tank setups that's changed with update 28 is the adjusted buff and debuff system. Fracture has been removed from the game and it's been added into Breach. So Breach is now including physical and spell penetration. Breach has been buffed as well, so the major has been increased from 5280 to 5948, and minor breach has been increased as well from 1320 up to 2974. Things such as resistances from Resolve have been buffed, so Major Resolve has been buffed, Minor Resolve has been buffed as well. Healing buffs and damage reduction have both been nerfed. This means tanks will potentially receive more damage and have less incoming healing. Empower has been buffed, now increasing the damage of light, medium and heavy attacks by 40% for 3 seconds rather than being consumed after one light attack. The big change to skills is the change to pierced armor. This will now apply minor and major breach with pierced armor, meaning this one skill will reduce the enemy's physical and spell resistance by 8922. So let's get onto group penetration. So major and minor breach is now providing a huge debuff to the enemy. If we were to consider a Magicka group, so we've got major breach, minor breach, an infused crusher. You may have an off-tank that uses crystal weapon. Basically, the total penetration for a Magicka group is 15,914, which means you are 2,286 pen away from the cap, which is 18,200 on most bosses. So for a Magicka group, you need to try and make up 2286 pen. If you've got the off-tank using crystal weapon, that reduces it by another 1,000, so it's only 1286 instead. With a stamina group, you've got, again, major breach, minor breach, infused crusher. You've got tremor scale, which you would be using in this situation. You've got crystal weapon, which you definitely should be using. It's a stamina-based skill. Having a stamina sorcerer in group for that would be a good idea. This puts your total pen at 13,425. Which means you are 3,775 pen away from the 18,200 boss pen. Now, with those two numbers, so we need to make up 2286 for Magicka and 3775 for stamina. So we've got to also consider other penetration effects as well. So Nightblades now have a flanking passive. So if they're stood behind or to the side of an enemy, they gain 2,974 extra pen. Necromancers have the Dismember passive, which gives them 1,500 more pen. If you've got a Sork in the group who's using Crystal Weapon, that's 1,000 pen. And if you decide to use the set Taurug's Pact with an Infused Gold Crusher, you're looking at an extra 957 penetration. The CP needed for the pen cap. So if you've got a Sorcerer, Templar, Dragonite or Warden in a Magicka group, they would need 25 CP to gain max pen without Alkosh. If you're on a Necromancer, you would need 8 CP, and on a Nightblade, you would need 0 CP when flanking, or 25 CP if you're not flanking or in something such as Sunspire. For stamina, this is a little bit different, so Sorcerers, Templars, Dragonites and Wardens would need 47 points to get to the pen cap. So in that situation, it's probably better to use Alkosh. Necromancers would need 25 CP. You could use Alkosh or Sharpen Weapons in that situation. Again, that's quite a few champion points, so you've got to kind of decide which one is going to be the better option for your group. And then Nightblades would need 8 CP when flanking. Or you would need to use Alkosh when not flanking or doing VSS. So the question, do we need Alkosh? The simple answer is, add pulls, yes, you need Alkosh. Magicka groups on boss fights, no, you don't need Alkosh. Stamina groups on boss fights, yes, you do need Alkosh, but it's maybe dependent more on the DD classes. So for add pulls, when dealing with a stack of adds, it's often hard to max debuff a full stack of 6 to 8 adds. Tanks will usually range taunt some of the adds and some of the enemies, meaning they will be missing the major and minor breach from Pierce Armor. Healers won't apply Elemental Drain to everything. It's usually not that the fights are usually not long enough, or the adds are too stacked and it's difficult to apply Elemental Drain. So trying to apply debuffs to individual adds takes too long. Overpen on add pulls is generally not a bad thing, as you want to be maxed on their reduced resistances so the group can eliminate them as fast as possible. So in Update 28, add pulls will generally consist of using a Major Breach AoE skill, such as Razor Caltrops, or Noxious Breath, as these now do Major Breach, which is physical and spell resistance reduction. So you go into an add pull, you throw Caltrops, you're wearing Defiled Dragon, which does Minor Breach, and then you use Alkosh, most likely with Markarth Band, and this will max debuff an entire stack of adds in 3 very simple moves. For Magicka groups on boss fights, in this situation, we should remove Alkosh. The reason why is because for the vast majority of groups in the game, the Alkosh uptime is not above 80%. For any Alkosh downtime, there is a loss of damage if damage dealers are expecting the enemy to be fully debuffed and they have 0 spell erosion CP. If we are in a group with Nightblade DDs, they will already be at the pen cap with 0 spell erosion and no Alkosh, but they have to be flanking, which means they have to be at the side or behind the enemy. Necromancers need 8 CP into spell erosion because they also have a pen passive. All other classes would need 25 CP into spell erosion to reach the cap. The reason why it's the better option to not use Alkosh and to use the CP instead is because we are guaranteeing 100% uptime on max pen, rather than having potential Alkosh downtime and losing out on pen. This also means tanks can use other sets and provide additional damage buffs or group support and survivability. For stamina groups on boss fights, 3775 pen is quite a lot to be missing, so this makes Alkosh kind of a requirement here to reach the pen cap. This is extremely situational, however. You still have to consider the group composition, as a boss fight with a stamina Nightblade would make Alkosh less useful. You would only need 801 pen from the CP, at which point it would be better to invest the 8 CP over using Alkosh, because you're guaranteeing that 100% uptime on max pen again. A Necro would be 2275 away from the cap, so that's 25 CP. But you would also be guaranteeing that 100% pen over using Alkosh. If there are other classes in the group other than Necros and Nightblades, you could use Turugs and use 32 CP into piercing, because Turugs is a more reliable uptime compared to Alkosh, since you don't have to rely on the supply and timing of synergies, you just have to cast Blockade. But also, it can be quite unreliable using Blockade as well, because sometimes if there's more than one enemy, there's more than one target in a fight, that Crusher can activate on a different target. So the next question is, what tank sets do we need? What do we replace Alkosh with? If we drop Alkosh, we've kind of got 2 options. So we can provide an additional source of group damage buff with another set, or we can offer group sustain and survival, which may be necessary with the increase of enemy damage and the lost benefit of the healing buffs. We also consider the tank's experience and whether we're going to be better off using an automatic aura set, which just works in the background automatically, which we have to do nothing, or with an experienced tank, will they be able to maintain and proactively use a set that requires some kind of maintenance, some kind of ability to maintain the buff. So one of the main sets to consider is Spell Power Cure. It's extremely easy to maintain. It's a group buff that increases damage. As a tank, you just need to place Sanguine Altar. The reason you'd use Sanguine Altar is for the longer duration. This will achieve a good uptime by doing nothing other than recasting Altar once every 30 seconds. So it's a very easy group buff to maintain. All you've got to do is make sure that no one else in the group is using any kind of ability that causes minor lifesteal. And the uptime from this is going to be extremely high and very easy to maintain. The next set is Gallonway. This becomes more useful with update 28 as it now empowers all light, medium and heavy attacks for 3 seconds. The problem with Gallonway is it's a 5-piece set, and it can be easily replaced by using one Necromancer who is casting one skill. So they've got Empowered Grasp, which also causes Empower. For any upper tier group, they will likely just use a Necromancer, probably a Necromancer tank, and get Empower via the Empowered Grasp skill. The benefit the set will have to inexperienced groups is it's a pretty good tank set for an actual tank to use. It makes them stronger, it gives them a good health pool. It's completely automatic, so the tank does nothing other than tank, and it provides an additional damage buff. So it's effectively just a damage buff for just doing your normal duties as a tank. The issue with that, though, is groups that might not have a Necro tank or a Necro using Empowered Grasp. Some of the lower tier, beginner level progression groups are probably quite unlikely to make any serious use of Empower. So when dealing with the Empower buff, it requires DDs. It requires the damage dealers to be passing really high. It requires the damage dealers to have a really good light attack ratio to benefit from the buffed light attacks, or else the damage increase is way under 1% and other sets might be more useful. So your DDs need to be able to light attack weave in between skills. If you're in a group where DDs don't use light attack weaving, it's probably better not to use Gallonway because you're not going to get any benefit from it. The next set that might be used now is Worm Cult. So it's already a set sometimes used by tanks, usually off tanks, but it's now potentially more of a main tank set, since it's another set that is automatic, requires no effort to manage. You just equip the set and you can just stand there, you do nothing, and you give everybody in a Magicka group an increased amount of Magicka recovery. So it's a potential set that main tanks might use now, which they might not have done in the past. The next set would be Ebon. So this is a set again that's already used in quite a lot of groups, mostly by off tanks again. With tanks now taking a slight increase in damage, it may be required to run more health for some of the more inexperienced tanks. So combining Yolnahkrin and Ebon on a main tank would be a possibility. And it would mean you have a really nice health pool, which might help with some of the newer tanks to survive more situations and deal with the increase in damage, help with some of the more difficult mechanics, because you will have a much higher health pool than you would do currently. Another set is Grave Guardian. This is a fairly uncommon set that is used, but with the loss of Alkosh, it could be introduced for progression groups. If sets like Spell Power Cure, Worm, Ebon, and things like that are all covered and you're running out of options, then this is a set you could use which will provide a group resistance buff. When you combine it with major resolve from things like Frostcloak, you would see damage dealers pushing resistances of up to 25k plus, which is going to increase the group's survivability. The main tank's going to be at the resistance cap. It means you might have more CP and other options available. You wouldn't need to run reinforced gear. You wouldn't need to run the lady. You wouldn't necessarily need to be a Nord for the resistances if you're using this particular set. Morak Tong is another set option that you could use. This is a stamina group buff set. You would need to consider the previous information about stamina DDs and if it's worth losing Alkosh in your particular group. If it is worth losing Alkosh, Morag Tong would probably be the best set to replace Alkosh for a stamina group. It increases stamina DD's individual DPS by about 3%, but it does depend on what skills and things you are using. It's a pretty considerable amount, 3%, when you compare it to Yolnahkrin, which is approximately a 1% DPS increase, so this would likely be your next best option for a stamina group. The next set is Gossamer. Now, this is typically a healer set. It's another set that you could work into your team if you've already got all the other sets covered and you're running out of options, or Your group needs some extra survivability through different gear options. It's only worth using it in a situation where you're dealing with area of effect damage from the enemies. In this situation, using Gossamer provides major evasion to your group, which you would activate by placing and refreshing Sanguine Altar again once every 30 seconds, so it's nice and easy to maintain. You don't have to do anything. You place an altar down once every 30 seconds, and the set just works automatically by itself. But it will increase your group's ability to survive, especially in high damage situations where they're dealing with area of effect damage. There's ground-based abilities on the floor. This will protect them. We've got Powerful Assault, which is already used by tanks. It's already used by off-tanks. The reason I'm mentioning this set is because the off-tank might need to switch this set from weapons and jewelry over to the body. This set really depends on how your main tank is setting up. But if you're trying to increase your group damage, the main tank's not close enough to the group usually to accurately maintain the set, so the off-tank's got to use it. It's an important set for a group, and there are very few heavy armor sets needed for tanks, so it's quite possible the off-tank might need to use this on the body pieces, especially when the main tank's using two heavy sets such as Jornakrin and Eben to deal with situations where they're trying to stay alive themselves. This does mean that you're going to be tanking in medium armor, and if you're not comfortable, you would have to consider using reinforced pieces to try and boost up your survivability while using it. Martial Knowledge is another potential tank set. It is a good set to use in combination with Powerful Assault. So this could be used by the main tank. It wouldn't be ideal. It would be a lot of risk involved because you've got to keep your stamina low to maintain the buff. And you've got to be doing that intentionally. So it's a lot of risk to try and use Martial Knowledge on the main tank because you don't typically want to be hovering your stamina at below 50%. If you can help it, you want to be building up your stamina so you can deal with mechanics and block phases. It would pair well with Powerful Assault on an off-tank though, because if you're proccing Powerful Assault by using Vigor, that's going to be reducing your stamina, which means Martial Knowledge is going to activate quite easily. So it's a good pairing with Powerful Assault, and it will fit into a group reasonably well. Livewire is another set. This is going to be more for ad pulls, especially in stamina groups. This concusses enemies as an AoE, and then you can instantly set them off balance straight away by casting your Lightning Blockade. Magicka groups will sometimes have less benefit from this set, especially in very experienced groups who use an ad pull setup with lightning staves, but this is a very good way to debuff an ad pull. If you've already got the other sets covered, you can use Livewire, which will cause concussion. So you would use this set if you want to increase your damage on ad pulls and you're in a reasonably inexperienced Magicka group or a stamina group. Dragon's Defilement is more important than ever to use for ad pulls. It's generally pretty difficult to debuff enemies when you're dealing with 6 to 10 ads at the same time. And the buff to Minor Breach means this set will help you max pen ads very, very quickly and efficiently. So you run into an ad pull, you get hit by a melee attack, Dragon's Defilement procs and causes Minor Breach onto all the enemies inside the circle. And it just means that you can debuff everything very quickly and efficiently. Finally, you got Torug's Pact. This is not an essential set, but you would never use it on ad pulls. You would never use it on Magicka groups. Stamina groups could potentially use it for more consistency over Alkosh. And it could be used by an off-tank in situations where a main tank might be using something like Eben and Jornakrin, and the off-tank needs a heavy armor set that provides some kind of group buff and there is nothing else. So you could slot Torug's Pact for that if you need it. So, in conclusion, Alkosh is a set we do not need for update 28 with Magicka-based groups. We do need it for ad pulls. For stamina groups, it will be highly situational and dependent on what class the damage dealers are. We've mentioned all of the most useful sets for optimizing group content are, but with all the changes there feels like there's definitely much more variety for main tanks especially, and the gear options will be more group dependent. It will vary based on the tank experience, and you really can kind of customize things a little bit more than you could previously when Alkosh was an absolute staple point to the main tank's gear options, and now you have got more kind of variety in what you can use in those slots. So that's all from me. If you want to see more content from the Tank Club, make sure you check out our website, thetankclub.com. We've also got a Discord. The link is in the description below. We've now opened guilds also mainly aimed at beginner tanks. So if you're a beginner tank, you want a guild where you can talk to other tanks and get help with crafting and food and that sort of thing, make sure you search for the Tank Club on your server. Thank you all for watching and see you next time. Bye bye for now.